Well, it's so good to see you. It's
It's so
been
good to see
years.
you.
I don't know how long it's been since we worked together.
Yeah, I left
Oh,
the company in that December of 2021. Yeah.
okay.
Hmm.
Yeah, so it's been a while, but I've been following you through social
Thank
media and trying to
you.
stay connected, and you've been inspiring me, and just it's been so interesting to see the shift and to see the new things that you're sharing,
Mhm.
and so it's been quite a journey, it seems
It
like, for
has
you.
been, and I've been following you all as well. And you guys are in Northern Virginia?
Yep.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Big change. Yeah.
Well, it looks awesome.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's definitely different than California, but
Yeah.
we're able to be close to family and everything now, and it's
Nice,
a
nice. Yeah.
fun experience.
So we
Yeah.
Thank you
moved
so
to
much for
Virginia.
reaching out and following my journey. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah.
It's been nice where you've been able to connect with me, and I feel supported by someone that has been in the field, and I'm not kind of just like talking all this. Basically, it's been interesting to put this out there and receive feedback from the field. So it's been very nice to have your support, and I really appreciate that.
Oh. Oh, good.
So you are or a board certified behavior analyst, or were, or are still currently?
Was
Yes. Was.
up until May 30th of this year. I was, yes.
Okay.
Wow.
And then you have a son with PDA.
PDA
Tell us
autism.
what autism PDA is, a specific form, or tell us what
Yeah,
tell us what
so
PDA is.
we did not know. Obviously, as a BCBA, I've worked with families with autism, and the more I learn, the more I have worked with kids with PDA profiles. But PDA is really a nervous system disability, to where someone has extremely heightened neuroception, and they perceive lots of the world, specifically like demands, external, internal, or losses of autonomy, as a threat, and they either go into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. My son has an external profile and goes into fight very easily. And so much of what how our society operates, and as BCBAs, what we've been taught, is contraindicative to working with someone with a PDA profile. And it's really just understanding it's a can't, not won't shift. And it's not that my son just did not want to go to school because it was aversive. It's that physiologically he could not tolerate it, and he would mask at school. And then when I would go to pick him up, you could just see it in his face, the release, and he would full blown go into fight mode. So even just getting him home from school or to school was very, very, very challenging, very traumatic for all parties involved. And we didn't really notice, we didn't know and it might have been because I was a BCBA and I did accommodator offset for a little bit. We didn't know we kind of knew he was rigid, but we didn't know he was autistic. We didn't know about PDA. He did cry I would say, like, I took data like 80% of the day when he was an infant. And that's just because they have no autonomy, they can't control their body, right? And so that registers as a threat. The car was so hard. We were like always feeling the car seat, like, is there a needle poking him? But it's just that he was restrained. Like, it was just that. And he would scream and scream. He became more of a quiet toddler. And then once, we actually think the pandemic helped. He didn't go into burnout. He might have gone into burnout earlier, but because he was home with the pandemic, he didn't have as much demand. But once he started school and, things after school and those type of things, that's when we started seeing a very drastic increase in aggressive behavior. He had extreme, it was within like a month, he lost all his skills, like his writing skills. We could compare it, and he wasn't able to do all these simple tasks that he had been able to do. And then he became very OCD. He was like counting in his head how many girls are in his class, how many boys, who's next to him, and like making all these patterns. But it was really just so that he could tolerate being in that environment. So extreme OCD, didn't want to have anything of his sisters touch his. My voice was extremely triggering. Certain words I said would trigger him. My chewing, it's still there, but the chewing, like, we called it all these things: ADHD, misophonia. He got diagnosed ODD, DMDD, disruptive mood, I can't remember, just all the things he was labeled, and autism. This was after a week stay at Rady's, because he went into this burnout that was like really, really significant. And then that was when he was 6 years old. That time when this was all happening, I had to renew my CEUs just to keep my BCBA. I wasn't working as a BCBA at the time. And I just had to literally like put it on mute and just keep pressing play and clicking through, because every single thing that I was learning or that was being reinforced did not work for my kid, and only sent him further into dysregulation and burnout. So it really just started, if you work with clients, he would get up, and if he wasn't down the stairs first, if I was already downstairs, extreme distress. He's very classic, and it's like, if he doesn't win, he's going to fight or flight. He's a very kind of textbook PDAer in that sense. And that really did actually help us once we started understanding what his neurotype was, to accommodate him. And we now just live a very low demand, they call, low arousal, trauma informed, because again, he didn't go through necessarily a traumatic experience, but him just experiencing the world was is still very traumatic in certain ways. So taking a low demand approach, it really did help get him out of burnout. And when I say burnout, he was in his room 10 hours a day watching an iPad. We were bringing him food. He couldn't talk unless it was screaming. He could barely leave the house, even if it was a place he wanted to go to. And then the car was just, we still work on it, but it was a lot of trauma and, now PTSD from just going in the car anywhere. I think it's because he's not in control in that environment. So yeah, it's been a journey, and it's been me trying to reconcile what I once thought and believed in and practiced to my lived reality, where that is just not going to fly, does not work, and was actually harmful to him.
So it's not just seeing him as like being, I don't know, a jerk or not listening or you need more discipline or a bunch of behaviors, but this is an actual physical neurological
It's a
issue that
neurological disability. Yep. I wrote about, I think it was called before you call my kid a jerk, please no, because it will come out like that. It will come out. A lot of people, even in, family or past generations, kind of more of like a boomer generation, that kid's a brat, that kid needs discipline. I would never let my kid talk to me that way, all that.
Yeah.
But he only has access to those words at that time. And we know he's doing the very best he can at that time. So, and we still, yesterday he was cursing at Jane. He's another thing, he's neurotype, he's physically gifted. And so he's really, really good at surfing. But we'll go in the water and he'll have huge meltdowns, screaming in the ocean. And he just goes and does his thing and comes out. And it's almost like we kind of call it like a panic attack or an emotional seizure. A lot of kids that have this, you can't go back and have a teachable moment because they weren't even in their thinking brain at that time. And I don't know if it would be helpful. I just did want to show this book has really helped us explain PDA first for ourselves and then to others. It's called Poppy and the Overactive Amygdala. And it's a beautiful, just little short book. Anyone that comes and is going to work with both, or my son they just sit and for 15 minutes, take a look at this book. And then I'm like, you have any questions? It's kind of like our training Bible. And it's really just showing how that, when you're wired, your neuroception is wired to perceive threat when you don't have autonomy or when there's outside demands, that amygdala just takes over. And we all have it too. Not we all have autism, but we all, have a drive for autonomy. It's just this is to the highest level you could possibly have. And then it becomes disabling.
Can you tell people what does PDA stand for?
Pathological Demand Avoidance. Actually, the term, it's, depends on the person, but there's also a pervasive drive for autonomy. A lot of PDAers like that better, but really
that seems more.
I like that one.
Pervasive drive for autonomy. He likes that more so. The other day he was like, what does pathological mean? Like he knows it, and he's now able to coming to a point, he's going to be 9, able to really put words to his internal experience. So I'm always trying to write down what he's saying and be able to share it from that first person perspective. But yeah, it's something that's still, up until even 2 years ago, we had, as a field in behavior analysis, there was this movement. We don't consider neurotypes, right? Like it's all behavior, right? But if we're really not looking at how the brain works and how someone's neurobiology works, we can potentially do lots of harm. And these are the kids that, that you've worked with, or that are, they wake up cursing. They wake up so dysregulated because their brains are just, firing, that there's too much demand. And even sometimes just the world being as it is too much. It's very, very, especially when kids, it's not only kids, teens, adults reach that burnout. It was very, very scary. It was something I never have seen before, and just living it was like he would wake up screaming, hey, I want to go fishing at 6 a.m. And if you're just like, if you don't respond, you respond yes or no, it didn't matter. It was just, he was in such burnout and trying so hard to find any relief from all of this parasympathetic nervous system action.
When you're getting looked at or maybe judged in the shopping mall as a bad parent, or your toddler's crying 80% of the time, what did you do to get through those situations? Constant, I know there's your son's perspective, but as a mom, how did you handle that? That is a huge challenge. What did you do to navigate that?
How did you regulate your own nervous system? Because I'm sure you were going into fight or flight.
That
right?
is still a work in progress. When he was little, I brought him every doctor, they thought it was silent reflux. They thought all these things. One finally told me, he was like an internal medicine doctor. He was like, maybe this is just his personality. And I said, I can't accept that. I kept moving on. But, nobody was saying autism or I think that this could be recognized much earlier on than it is once a kid's already in burnout. But it was just kind of that quest. And then I would rely on, okay, well, like we could do X, Y, and Z. And Catherine and I worked at a really wonderful, holistic growth mindset company. But even still, anything that he needed to do, like teeth brushing, all that would set him into fight or flight. So we got creative, but at the same time, we also relied on, consequences and all the things that, just traditional parenting. And then really in the behavior field, I was taking data. It was maddening to me. Why is this working with every other kid? Every other kid I've worked with, they love my voice. They don't say anything about it. It was just very, very, very challenging. And even to this day, we kind of have to be ready to go out. Like if we're just going out and it's last minute and we're not like super, okay, we're going to be able to accommodate you or to be his body double or we're really working as his nervous system. It becomes very difficult. And so my husband and I both experienced a lot of trauma and really like CPTSD or parental PTSD from this, because not only are we, we're not understanding, society isn't. And the doctors are telling us, he needs this routine. He has to go to school. School will help, right? All these things. So it was really a lot of, and still to this day, we struggle yesterday was Halloween. We had a great time, but I was just like, I had everything. And I was like, I'm going as his support person. And that's great, but it's not always feasible and doable, especially I have another child, a daughter that's 11 that is in school and does all the things. So that's been really challenging, but really, again, understanding our own nervous system and having what I call compassion for capacity, for our own capacity, has been helpful. And then through, really just dropping demands. So taking a low demand approach to these outings, really cost benefit analysis, like, is this worth it? Is it not? Has been helpful, but it's still kind of a day to day, how's it going to go today type decision making to especially when we go out, because I think I emailed you, holidays, we just get in the panic attacks become more definitely increase in intensity, more frequent, but they're intense at this time. So yeah, I think just once I understood what PDA was, I just had this like, I want everyone to understand. I want the whole world. How can we not know about this? Because, we have this preschool to prison pipeline, right? And it's, I look at these stories and I'm like, yeah, because that kid cannot be in that environment. And when they are in fight mode, and it doesn't matter who's around. It doesn't matter what object, whatever it is, it's going to be thrown. It's a very hard thing to recognize first with your own child, but then when you see it around, it's been something that the drive for me to bring awareness to this has kind of really helped me to kind of get over that hump of caring what other people think. And we're kind of at a point where we're fine being the freak show on the road, because it's going to happen. Yeah.
And I think that your mission and spreading the word about this is not only helpful to those that do experience the same things and people that have no idea about it. It's going to help them become more aware. But like you said, preschool to prison. Yeah. I think everybody would benefit from knowing about their own nervous system. I teach psychology in college, and I'm teaching about the nervous system every day and including it in everything. And that this being in the sympathetic nervous system versus the parasympathetic nervous system, and the parts of your brain, like you mentioned, the amygdala. And I think everybody would benefit that. And not only are kids that have PDA or that profile of PDA are having exhaustion and meltdown and just burnout, but other kids are too that aren't being identified as that because of that model of schooling and the pressure. And so many people ask about, why is my kid doing great at school all day long? On the other spectrum, they're perfectly behaving. The teacher never sees any issues. And then they come home and they break down. And people act like that's normal. Oh, that's just because they got to keep it together all day. But that's a problem because they're masking and they're not listening to their nervous system, and they don't even get a chance. They gotta wait to go to the bathroom. And I could go on and on about this, but I think
and my kid was the one, like, they would tell him like probably 50 times a day, the lunch lady would tell him, sit down while you eat. And it's like, well, his body can't access food when he's sitting because he's looking for threats, scanning. So if he wants to eat, which his body needs, he's got to be standing. It's very, very true what you're saying. And there's like, well, you're his safe person. So then, it's almost like normalized. And it, to an extent, that's true for all kids, but it's really can have such devastating consequences to really, like, as they don't know any different. We're putting them in these environments. So he really became to a point where he just didn't want to go on, because it's like, well, you're my mom. I trust you the most. And this is it. Like, this is what I have to do. And I see it even a bit with my daughter, because the way school is structured. Now we're in this homeschool charter program, which is great. But I had to really deconstruct I had to unpair education with school. It took a minute, though. This is a great book by John Taylor Gatto, and it's called Dumbing Us Down, The Hidden Curriculum of Compulsory Schooling. And it really helps just kind of objectively see what kids learn. They first learn they're a number in a system. They learn that they get praise from the teacher when they do X, Y, and Z. It took a nice I love it because it's kind of behavior analytic as well. And it really helped shift my perspective of all the things that go into a kid just sitting quietly at school, like
I've,
what it takes.
I've read
Mhm.
some stuff recently about school was started so kids could work in a factory and not
Yeah.
get up and do other things, but just follow
Yeah.
directions,
Mhm.
follow routines, and be a number. And
Yep.
that kind of sounds
Yeah.
like
And
what
the
you're saying.
bells, like that was the
I was
factory
just gonna
bells.
say that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Get up, move to the next thing when the bell
So it
rings. It's
felt
gonna
like when he was in kindergarten and Burnout started, I pulled him out. And I'd love one day if we could chat with my husband too, because it was very hard for him. He's first generation Korean, was raised, education, because like it's so important because that's how you succeed in life. And in
Mhm.
his life, that is what happened. He did well in school and was able to, he went to the Naval Academy, became a Marine officer, all that. And so just seeing it, like he's never even seen a model of where anyone could be successful without these steps. It's so
Mhm.
ingrained, and high performance is praised and all that. So he's really had to do a lot, almost maybe probably more work than me with that, with the school. But we kind of knew there was no other alternative. Like unschooling was the only way we could go because school education had been so poisoned because everything was demand driven, and then
Mhm.
lack of autonomy. But now we explore the world through surfing, and we have a map of all the
Mhm.
surf breaks in the world, and he knows because like we do it through this lens of system accommodation, or is this within their window of tolerance. Each day is very, very different, and that's a hard thing for me as a VCBA who
Yeah.
likes routine. But yeah, I do think PDA will, once there is a universal understanding, it will shift the way we educate, as well as the field of, I truly feel the field of behaviorist will, it's like we can't keep going the way we are. You can't. It's almost like it's just an inconvenient truth at this time. I wrote about this benefit when you look at it in behavioral terms for people in the field of behavior. It's a reverse cost benefit analysis. So we're acknowledging the neurobiological implications for someone's well-being, or the development of a neurodivergent person with extremely sensitive neuroception. That's our PDA autism. It would be so misaligned with the current well-established systems and therapeutic modalities and educational systems. There'd be little benefit in furthering research and adopting a PDA nervous system lens, because everything runs right now on this compliance based, get
Yeah.
them to be able to tolerate and then perform system. It's going to take a lot of time, but I don't mind being the one to just call it all out because I have nothing to lose. Like I'm not a BCBA anymore. I
Mhm.
went to CalAba last year and left like cards and links to my Instagram. I didn't have a website at the time. I sat through a session and it was very, very painful, but I got to meet with some really cool people that are starting this shift within the field.
So people are going to ask low demand communication. We've done a lot with declarative language and RDI, and
Yeah.
what does that look like for you and your family, and how do you get them to do anything, or what does that look like for you and
So
your
we
family?
don't, that's just the shift of, there's no getting anyone to do any. There are times this is a huge struggle when, there's things we have to do, but we kind of take this approach of, really, we stopped talking. We just stopped talking to him because our voice
Mhm.
and everything was so triggering when he was in Burnout. So we did a lot of mm-mm and pointing, like like what food does he want? And it was like, I know he understands language. We have the language. He has the language. It doesn't matter. We had to go to a very low, like even a toddler, I would talk more to. It was like knowing what modalities he could and could not tolerate. And then sometimes I'll still do that, give him choices, and he'll be like, no, you can talk, mom, I got it. Like he can
Mhm.
tell me what he can tolerate. But it was leaving that behind. How do I get him to? How do I get him to learn? How do I get him to go to school? How do I get, we really had to say, how do we just get through a day with him feeling safe in his body? That was like our goal first, because we did have self-injurious behavior, and because he's so physical, that all skateboards are thrown. It became like we just had to focus on safety. And I think when kids have this profile and have it to the extent where you really realize it's, your kid's safety and ability to remain alive and well, it's easier to drop those demands. For us, it was because we really saw everything else was not working. So the declarative language has been good. I still am always, I wonder, we just put it out there. It's very rare for me to ask him a direct question unless it's about food or candy. Then I'll know he's okay with it. But it becomes, at first, you're clumsy with it, but then in terms of behavioral analysis, it's reinforced. It really does help him not go into fight or flight because of the demand of a question. But yeah, it's still hard. There are days he can't school. There are days he's very, very wakes up dysregulated. And we have plans. We have to be very flexible. I can't work. I'm now his primary caregiver. We were finally able to get regional center. That was a very hard process. We have respite that comes. And there are times like it's just real, like I have to get my daughter to school and he doesn't want to go. So I have to call a friend. It fluctuates. It has been challenging, but it's so much easier than taking any sort of behavioral contingency approach.
You got to definitely pick your battles. There are no battles.
Yeah.
Like you have to be flexible, understanding at all times.
And you do pick, like there is a cost benefit analysis. Casey Elric, she runs At Peace Parents, and I highly recommend. She's a podcast, but really great content for providers. And a lot of it is cost benefit analysis. When you are a caregiver or a parent of someone with PDA, autism, the one thing that she talks about, and it's still like, it's so hard to accept, but you have to accept that you're either activating or accommodating their nervous system. There's very few states where they're not being, the cumulative nervous system activation is not growing. It's very hard to get them into a flow, like everything's chill, there's nothing's coming to attack me state. And so when I divert my attention to my daughter and he's not engaged in a special interest or there's no other human there for a body double, that activates him. Now, will he go into full-blown fight or flight? And that depends. And that's where I kind of go back to like setting event, like where he's at, but it's always activating or accommodating. That's like, I think the hardest, like the rock in the hard place, looking at it from that perspective. But I have found that it is very, very true. And it's true for everyone to an extent, but this is like, can my kid go out? The neighbor kids are out. Should I send him out to go play or should I not? Because I know where his window of tolerance is right now. And if it's close to he's going into fight or flight, I have to make those decisions and just kind of living each day where we know we can accommodate as much as possible. And there are times where we're just like, no, it's going to be a meltdown day because we can't, like there's just like too much to do, or my husband travels for work, or the respite cancels or whatever it is, But yeah, I think that's been an adjustment and we're still adjusting to it. And it's still kind of hard to believe at times, but we were reminded daily that that's kind of our lived reality.
Yeah.
But just to add to that, the accepting that you're either activating or accommodating someone with PDA, I like to look at it through this lens of FIT, which is just an acronym for really having some radical acceptance for that fluctuating capacity is normal. And we all have fluctuating capacity. It just looks different at times for someone with PDA, because it's like sometimes if he just needs a day at home or a day just doing nothing but playing with putty, and then the next day he's, can go to a play date and go surf. It really is that fluctuating capacity. That is, if we can begin to normalize that, of course, it's very hard within the systems we're in. Fluctuating capacity is normal. And then interdependence is normal. And that's been something working in the fields of behavior, especially in the time, the early 2000s, 2010, it's like everything, independence equals the highest quality of life. If you're independent, you're going to have a great quality of life. We're always striving for independence. There's no goals written for interdependence, but we do really see that, you know, PDA is not a new thing. People with it they just haven't even been able to honestly like live or be in society to the extent they are now. I believe that there are generations of PDAers that juvenile detention, prison, institutions just didn't even have a chance. So really we try to look at it from an interdependence lens and how interdependence has been normal in cultures. It's just now we're so hyper focused on individualism and having those independent living skills. And I'm not saying that's not a goal for us. But I do look at it like, okay, it's fine that I can do this and he needs me to do it. And that's okay, and just kind of going from there. And then T is, I just really like to say, treat yourself and others with compassion for capacity. Because if we really look at it like he has, or PDA has the capacity, if he has to scream, that's how he has to answer. That's all he has in him. That's his capacity at this moment. I don't have to, talk to him about it later and do all these things. I just, okay, that's his capacity. Let's move on. And then I also have to have compassion for my own capacity, which is it becomes challenging, but the more support, and that's another thing nobody really wants to talk about, but we just need more safe people that understand nervous system disabilities to be there. And that is really hard to do when, for, you guys know, insurance funds mostly ABA or behaviorism type therapies. So that's been a big challenge for us as well. But we find good respite people and kind of untrain them if they have been in the field of ABA. And that's been helpful. But it's definitely a challenge when really the only way to have time to yourself or have a break or be in your own nervous system is to have someone else, another safe person there.
Yeah. And it sounds like, it takes a great deal of mindfulness and present moment awareness from the parent or anybody that's interacting to take the time to regulate our own nervous system and then also to be present enough in the moment to observe objectively and adapt without your own agenda and judgments on what that person's doing, whether
not
he's
react and be like, why are you yelling at me?
Reacting. Right? Yeah. Or then, like even having the vibe of that, they can they read everything,
Oh, yeah.
So if what you say is misaligned with what you're really feeling, it's like very activating. Yeah.
And then it sounds like a great deal of co-regulation is involved when you say the body double or the support person or caregiver. That person is almost, and I'm trying to understand, they're setting up kind of a co-regulation, which we have with infants and babies, that we're co-regulating with them. We're actually helping them regulate to start. So it kind of sounds like that's what you're doing.
Yeah.
With
and
them.
It's something for what his level, so he can't. And I do think there are pediatrics that can be alone, but my child needs line of sight with someone or goes into instant panic. And it usually, like, he needs a safe person, or he is getting the activation is beyond what he can control. So we still, he doesn't sleep, but like it's all the time. It almost is like that infant, like he needs that co-regulation with someone to feel safe at almost all times. So that's just logistically is very, very difficult. And you can see, especially, I just had a surgery. I can just see how parents of PDAers that, are still facing, the only thing being offered is, continuing to go to school, forcing therapies, things like that. If a parent or caregiver that really understands that child and accommodates becomes incapacitated or things shift, a setting event, there's a change, it can be so devastating because really they just need a few people that really understand them. But when that shifts, that's when I could see what happened to Ryan. That I could see that in our own lived reality, where it's like when I was down and out, of course, we had other people here, which was great. But if we did, I don't know what would have happened. It's to that level of extreme where you're really, their ability to continue to be safe and stay alive is based on other people's understanding of what is going on. You see a kid attacking a parent in a parking lot and you're like, what that, stop, kid, what are you doing to your mom or dad? And that's fine. And he's young now, but as this changes, and I'm not saying it's great that he goes into that, it is just part of his neurotype. And it is something that we worry about in the future as he gets older. Really, I do see, and just honestly, it's what's so terrible is just it's socioeconomic status, it's race, it's everything, and a lot of PDAers just really don't have a chance because they are so misunderstood. So misunderstood. So anytime I hear ODD or anything like that, I automatically need to re-examine, like, is it really that, or is there a nervous system disability similar to someone that's been very, very traumatized?
ODD, operational defiant disorder.
Yeah,
What's the difference
oppositional
between?
defiance disorder, because these kids look like ODDers because anytime you say anything to them, they do the opposite because they want to literally get back into a sense of safety in their body, and they need autonomy to do that. So if you tell him to do one thing, he's going to do the exact opposite. And it's not like playing psychological games. It's just really knowing that their drive for autonomy, they will literally, someone with PDA neurotype, it will override their nervous system activation or their drive for autonomy or equality within a situation will override their basic survival instincts. So a lot of kids do stop eating, being able to toilet regression. Everything looks like regression. Their capacity to actually perform is overridden by their drive for autonomy and for being able to even speak. There were times, he's fully verbal, but could not, when burnout, speak. And for him, it will even be like, don't go in the road to chase the ball. He understands, but that's going to be overridden by his drive for autonomy. So we have to be careful what we say also. Not careful, but just knowing that, like, if he can climb, he climbs. Like, if he climbs a high fence, I usually just wait for him to come down, especially when he's really activated. And this doesn't happen much anymore because I don't have to go to this school pickup area anymore for my daughter, but I wouldn't say come down right now because I knew he'd get more hurt because he would jump at that time. He would just, like you said, something and I'm going to have full autonomy of this situation. So it would really override his survival drive or his drive to just keep his body safe. We've had it even getting into the car and there's cars coming. It's like very real in terms of safety. And I think that taking that safety lens first, it did help us come to terms with him not, being able to go to school and things like that, because it was like, I can't keep him safe. His mom, I can't keep him safe. And when it's just one parent and both kids, it's that much more challenging.
So you are his anchor, his safety net, and he's
and
up and down, and you have to be that. Yeah, your family.
And then I can model that for his respite people. But I mean, it's definitely, I've been lucky to be able to have, state funding to become his caregiver. It's somewhat of an impossible situation, just the way things are structured for people. People have to send their kids to school, and it's an extremely hard lived reality, and many people will continue to try to capitalize off it and continue the behaviorism route. And there's such a drive for in school, and I get it, but it's like, it's just butts and seats make the money, right? Like it's very challenging when you see how the systems run and your child there's no place. There's not one place I can think of. And I even tried potentially for him to go to where we used to work for a one-on-one kind of school setup. But, just the energy and effort to do any of that, parents don't have, because we are busy caregiving, and then our brains also don't have the executive functioning I personally think that I once did, because so much goes into really just being in that moment and being able to radically accept that I'm either activating or accommodating.
What you mentioned, you reduced your verbal
Mm-hmm.
communication, and honestly, that's my number one advice to all the people I train and work with.
Oh,
I would say 99.9% of people talk too much. We're constantly putting demands and instructions and prompting and correcting our clients, and nobody likes to be told what to do, is what I tell everybody. I
mhm,
don't, you don't, and our clients do, and they're probably told hundreds, thousands of times. And at the end of the day, they see social interactions as a conflict, and that is kind of the deficit of the diagnosis. And so how do we change that? I think all of us could benefit from just stop talking, do more
mhm.
listening, and connecting and sharing about your perspective, your modeling, your thoughts, your ideas, and allow them, set up the
Mhm.
environment to allow them to access through you.
It's
Yeah,
very
and it's
hard. I don't know why it's so hard to stop talking. It was so challenging. It
Oh
was
yeah, it
so
took us
challenging.
years. It took
Yeah.
me years to
that's how
go
we're
from the
trained.
ABA brain to the
Yeah.
that sort of
Yeah.
communication, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so I'm wondering, so in addition to the communication piece, so since it's a nervous system, you call it a
Mhm.
nervous system disorder or nervous system
Disability, I call it. Yeah.
disability? Okay.
Mhm.
So, and if we know that there are things that can take us, so our sympathetic nervous system is when we're in the fight or flight, and the
Mhm.
parasympathetic is when we go into rest and
Yeah.
digest. And so, if is there the things that we know that take us into rest and digest and out of fight or flight, do those things typically work? And do you use some of those strategies like mindfulness or breathing or movement or sunlight or nature or any of those things that typically sleep, the
Mhm.
things that we know from a psychology perspective that can get us to that place? Are
Mhm.
those things that benefit individuals with PDA?
I believe so, but I believe that they would have to autonomously find that for
Oh,
themselves. It's
okay.
very like, let's practice mindfulness. Like that ain't going to like for my son at least, or
Yeah.
for my, and even thinking about clients that I've worked with in the past, for a lot of PDAs have special interests, like being able to pursue that special interest has, I mean, been huge. My son's really into the water, surfing, fishing. He likes to skateboard. And
Mhm.
we've been able to find people that he's had a surf coach, skate coach that really, we're able to explain it to him. And they kind of a little bit see themselves in it, in that they understand that the only time they feel peace is when they're doing this thing that they love. They feel that complete
Mhm.
freedom. He's a kind of kid, because we've set up this low demand life, like he does, he'll take like a 2 hour nap randomly, in like maybe a few times, or once or twice a week each morning, and we just let him do that. His brain needs it, his body needs it, like it
Yeah.
truly needs it. So we do find that it just can't be, prescribed in any way. Or
Mhm.
the best thing we can do, and it's hard for us though, is we model it, right? Like, and we try to model it as best we can, or just talking about, this is what mommy does, or I need to go for a walk right now, that kind
Mhm.
of thing does definitely help. But really, like the way you were just talking about, Brian, the social situations become aversive. He, again, if he feels there's not that level of equality, sometimes he kind of likes to be above too in social stature. Again, automatic fight or flight. So when we say these kids have social skill deficits, sometimes I don't think he does. He just perceives things so differently, that goes into that fight or flight so automatically. He's just like, if kids are racing and he loses the race, it's like classic, like it's just going to
Mhm.
happen. This meltdown's going to happen. But even just like very simple misunderstandings, he's just perceiving the world through such a heightened state of neuro and perceived threat. And that's where
Mhm.
I didn't really understand how intense it was for him until I read this book, Sensory Trauma. It's great. It really gives some insights into how we take for granted what might be even something pleasant for us. It could be so, for yourself, could be so triggering and internalized dysregulating for someone with highly sensitive neuroception.
You mentioned the holidays are generally a hard time.
Yeah.
What do you think it is about the holidays, and have you identified patterns or things?
Yeah.
Obviously, the holidays are
Um,
one of them. And what do you do with that?
Yeah, I think I also defer to my friend Amanda Diekman. She wrote a book called Low Demand Parenting, which I have, but I couldn't find. She just was talking about this today. They're so perceptive to shifts in energy and shifts, just subtle shifts in the expectations of, oh, everyone's expected to do X, Y, and Z this holiday. Costumes, all, Halloween. We don't, whatever we have tons of masks and dress up, and for him, whatever he wants to wear out, that, yesterday he wore a mask, it was great. We can't really feed into that because it becomes a demand. Now, demands are tricky because, right, there's the external demand, go brush your teeth. Then internal demand, I feel hungry. Now, even hunger can set off the fight or flight. It really internal demands as well. But then there's these societal demands and this energy and the shift that we really do see a lot of PD parents, see a heightened dysregulation during this time. And I think it's part of us too. They see we're now planning for things and doing things a little different around the holidays. I mean, my mom has given him gifts and he has yelled and cursed, and why would you ever give me that? You just go to, oh, my kid is ungrateful and such, how am I can't really normalize someone getting yelled at for giving a gift. So we have to really shift the way we do things. And there's grief in all of this. And it's like a loss of just doing things the way that you did as a child, or that you expected to do, sorry, the lighting, as, a parent. I do think really just having grace for yourself during the holiday seasons, and preparing for it, just like, oh, things might be harder, and so we get more support. Like, this is when we have more respite, or my parents are visiting, or his parents are visiting, to kind of know that to have more support during the holiday season. A lot of it is unspoken demands that are just, keep him at a heightened state of activation. So once he kind of reaches that capacity, things become more intense. So we do see that, especially around Halloween. There's a lot of we just kind of have a history of trauma now of these kind of holidays and going out and having huge big upsets, meltdowns. But just yesterday we did great. I had wipes, I had water, I had everything with me. So we have abated a lot of what had caused previous meltdowns. My husband went with my daughter, I went with my son, because there's no way to accommodate both. And I think that's there's no hack for that, but it's just that it ebbs and flows for me. Radical acceptance that this is my lived reality. We also vacation separately often, just to be able for my daughter to feel free and can say and do and be fully without having to say, oh, is that going to trigger a threat response, or having that feeling. Stuff is really, really hard with we found with PDA, but that's pretty universal. Is challenging with siblings. So hopefully I answered a little bit. I know that people have very specific strategies. A lot of it is just informing family members, hey, we're going to just do it different this year. I hope it's okay with you, and setting that boundary. And if they are not comfortable with it, that's fine too. And maybe they don't participate, as it's not a big family Thanksgiving, or we order whatever food everyone's in the mood for. So really kind of shifting what it looks like and preparing others, or making sure others are understanding, has been very helpful for us. Because if we still felt like, oh, we don't do a traditional Thanksgiving, we're failures, we would be there's just kind of no reason to do that anymore, when you understand that this is just meeting the needs of everyone in your family. Yeah, but it's definitely a shift, and there's so much commercialism and everything involved.
Yeah.
And, it's definitely challenging. You see just again what you thought your lived reality would be versus what it is, and just
It's
trying
definitely
not
a lot
to
of pressure.
compare. Yeah, trying not to
Yeah.
compare is very hard, but I honestly, it's getting easier with time though. Like as they've gotten older and as we've been like low demand parenting is our lifestyle now. But it took
Mhm.
it took a lot to get to this point, a lot of shifting. I think it was hardest for
Mm.
my husband, who, is just trained as a Marine. You do what you're told, no
Mm,
question asked, and yeah,
yes.
yeah.
That's very hard to make that shift,
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
yeah.
he's really had to do a lot. So.
Wow.
It was
Tell
hard for me as a BCBA too, but for him, I think, yeah. And just having
Yeah.
like, a different father-son relationship than he had expected. And it's been great though too. Like they surfed the North Shore together in Hawaii. I think that's another thing, is letting go of so much of what you thought would be this, like what you needed to be successful, and that it leaves room for opening doors to other things that we had never even imagined, and making connections. I have wonderful friends, online friends, but I've met some in person that just understand you and know you like that. And that's why I'm so thankful for technology and raising a PDA at this time, because I know generations before, you just had a bad kid. You just had a crazy kid. You
Mm.
just had a kid that shouldn't be around other kids. And just really recognizing that, and that it still happens. It's still people very, very little understanding of PDA or autism, or really looking at it from a medical model of deficit and symptomology and disability, really like kind of approaching it from that medical view. It seems very like a damning life if you really approach it from that way. So just knowing that there's low demand community out there,
Mm.
does, I think that alone, just seeing how another PDA or family does holidays, like just knowing that there's other people out there doing it all different, and telling, sharing their really very challenging lived experience. So I do think finding community has helped, especially during the holidays.
You recently met a mother whose son was killed by the police in a response that was not. Tell us a little bit about that. What that
So
experience was
when
like
I,
for
so
meeting.
we had been on our journey, like this happened in March. So my husband and I are like, I had this Instagram page with like 2,000 followers. Like just, I was able to work out a lot through this social media account. And I ended up getting a lot of BCBAs that, were learning and accepting. And that was great. So I was in this place where this is our lived reality and it's so hard, but we know what we're doing. And then to an extent, we know low demand's working for us. And I don't watch the news at all, but my husband told me, there was a 15-year-old killed. He's autistic. He grabbed I think it was a gardening tool, anything he has access, whatever's there. And he was chasing his sister, and the family had called the police in the past, and they were able to de-escalate. I don't know if it was the officer, someone did not know. They did not use a taser. They were shouting at him, stop, 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 and they said, I'll count to three or whatever, whatever that would be. He doesn't hear it. There's no way he heard it. He's in fight or flight, to the point no message is getting through. There's no way. I don't know. I'm not sure on all the details, but they did not use the least amount of force. And then they proceeded to treat the rest of his family in the most inhumane way I've ever witnessed. And because it was all on video, right? They released the body cam footage. And I reached out to his sister, and my husband's a pilot and she's becoming a pilot, and we've had just a lot of commonality, and they were able to come down and visit. And his mom recently had a stroke. And I could just see he was a track athlete, great kid, wanted social. And a lot of PDAers have their moments. They're wonderful people. They're kids growing, and they're doing things that kids do, and they have this love of life. And then they also have these moments that are so challenging, and just being misunderstood to that extent in that moment. That was the outcome. And I walked out after I saw that. I walked outside and I saw we had a big shovel in our garden, and I just cried. That is my kid. That shovel is
So easily it could have been your son, or it could happen to your
it
son.
could
Yeah.
be. And I want to live my life as like, how can that not be my kid, and how can we bring really some sort of restorative justice to the family of Ryan and so many like Ryan. And I think that's been a huge, once that happened, first elicited a ton of anger in me, like so much anger. I had like never felt that before. And then I really wanted to take that anger into action. We did an online, it's kind of cool. You can do online like campaign where people wrote sympathy cards, but also donated to the families. Basically, they could use this money for anything they needed. And it was really powerful. And we were able to give that when we met the family, and then just be able to talk to them. You're not, this is our life too. There's in no reality this should have happened. There's so much misunderstanding and mistreatment. And I'm not saying I understand, okay, if somebody is in that physical state, but if they could, know, that doesn't mean they shouldn't live. Like, they are having this moment of intense panic, and they need to be, I don't want them to harm others, but the least amount of force should be used. And it's just such a tragedy. And we think about it every day. It is our lived reality. And so I do want to bring attention to nervous system disabilities, PDA autism, to law enforcement, and not like a shame or blame kind of thing. It's just like, this is reality. People go through this. There are kids punching teachers. I get it. They shouldn't be punching teachers, but there's a reason they're doing. We have to understand a nervous system disability and what it means. And it's not easy. It's not easy to accept. You have to be able to hold two truths at once, that yes, this is really scary and this person's aggressive, and they also cannot control it. And it's very, very challenging, but it also can be freeing to make that choice, to be able to see both sides. And knowing, really, what I say is just even having a basic understanding of PDA autism can save lives in those really, really heightened situations, which, to be quite honest, the leaves fall a certain way, and your kids attacking you in the Target parking lot. It happens quickly, and it's something that you're not always prepared for. So people having basic understanding, I think would really help increase the safety of my children like mine, and adults as well.
If somebody saw that happening in the Target parking lot, what would you tell them
So
to do?
I think that they did this is not the Target parking lot, but a parking lot, and it's happened. And I was able, because I was in a place that wasn't my first rodeo. So I was like, they were like, what are you doing to your mom? And then he starts screaming at them. And then I was like, was able to say, he's autistic, he's learning, he's going through something. And it's like, how can I support? And at that point, supporting was just, he needed to not stop talking. Yeah. To kind of help me de-escalate. Actually, just him asking, it made me feel seen, but I didn't have to, he was like a chill guy, and I didn't have to like explain it to him, or like anything. It was, a younger person. I wouldn't say like, don't intervene, but just know that there's taking the least intrusive way of intervening first is best, right?
Just get curious, maybe ask for if they need help, or get curious,
ask
or
if you
make
need
sure
help, or just I think even just having a compassionate glance than a stare of like, oh my God,
Mhm.
like that
Yeah.
kid's, yeah, like even
Yeah.
that like can help
Mhm.
someone to stay in their thinking brain and nervous system to de-escalate. And I do think people, caregivers like having a lot of understanding. I forget the name of the training. There are, definitely methods for a lot of PDAers. Humor gets them back into their thinking brain. We'll just like fall on the floor, slapstick comedy. My potty jokes are a go-to for many PDAers, my kid especially. I think a lot of kids, but there are ways to de-escalate, and it's like I don't have the answers for every situation, but I do know
Right.
that if someone understood that this kid is just they are doing the best they can, and this is all they have left in them. They're not doing it by choice. It's not operant, and that's been a huge point too, where I'm trying. And I don't know, you probably do this in your work also, but so much of ABA is designed there. This behavior is operant. It's a means to an end. It's within the four functions. Like it's to get attention, access, avoid all of or sensory. It's, I believe, not operant. I believe it really just comes the nervous system. It's just automatic.
Yes.
It's just there, and it looked like this kid's cursing. Well, that's operant behavior, but it's that automatic flare. And you can even see a lot of PDA. You can see their eyes kind of shift. You could see
Right.
they're not
Mhm.
able to focus anymore. They're not there, and they don't have access to their thinking brain. And it's like a
Yeah.
hijacking, really. It's like
Yep.
a
Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
hijacked experience.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I definitely feel like you've helped us learn a lot, and
Yep.
hopefully those who
Oh, I
are
hope.
listening are learning.
Have you guys experienced? Do you guys just knowing a little bit now about or what you knew about PDA? Do you feel like you've worked with clients with PDA profiles?
Yes, and I've actually had a few that have shared that they
Okay.
thought that that was what, and so a few years ago at our old
Yeah.
company, I was introduced to an individual that I worked with where the mom taught me a lot about it, and
Good.
she talked about how it's really recognized in the UK and
Yeah, for
in
sure.
Europe, but here it's not as I
Mhm.
think there's awareness developing, which is
Very
great, and
much,
people
yeah. But
are
the
yeah.
UK PDA Society is it's well established. Now we have PDA North America, and Diane Gould, who founded that, was a former BCBA, and she wrote about how she
Okay.
let her BCBA lapse, and she was like, I loved that because then when mine lapsed, we were able to connect through that, and yeah, it was is gaining traction here, and I think it's more like, okay, well, now what do we do with it, right?
Mhm.
Because it doesn't work in these typically funded operating systems at all. I do have another book too, the educator's experience to pathological demand avoidance. So there's books
Oh.
coming out like it's an exciting time. It is also just hard when this is your lived reality. One of your questions or talking points was great. Like my motivation is based on my capacity. I'm always motivated, but my capacity is up and down based on my
Mhm.
child's nervous system disability. So I feel like I don't put a lot of demand on myself anymore for this advocacy work, but I really do like you reaching out or comment, just being supportive helps so much to remind me this is important and something I do want to continue to pursue, and really,
And
to the drive to keep my kid safe.
yeah.
Yeah, and others. Tell us a little bit before we go about your rehumanization project.
Yes, that is, I started the Instagram page, Revisionist Exploration, and it was just like me walking through all these huge paradigm shifts. No, that's not what's motivating my child's behavior. There's something in PDA. It's like there's will not or cannot. or can't or won't. It's not something they are, it's not operant, that they're not making the conscious choice not to, or to engage in these really just what is nervous, the observable nervous system activation, sympathetic response. And so that was wonderful. And I made a lot of great connections. And then once my BCBA was up at the end of May, I just kind of, Ryan had passed, and I was more just focused on talking to the family and kind of assimilating what had happened and realizing, yeah, like this is way bigger than my kid having a meltdown. Like it really, the implications, this are huge. And my husband, we've always played with an idea of maybe starting a nonprofit, and I'm still in the infancy phases of it, but I do want to offer, I want it to be easily accessible. Some of what I've written is on the PDA North America website, but I want to have that all accessible to anyone who's interested in learning more about PDA and our lived experience. And then I also want to I can't teach. I don't know if this is a thing for you guys. Like, teaching is, if I set out to teach my child something, there will be no learning. So I don't think I can ever teach again. And the word teach, the word learner, the word student, like it's very hard for me now to really embody any of that or understand it almost anymore. So I would love to one day facilitate perspective shifts.
I was just thinking, even the word help, it drives me crazy. Oh, do you need help? That implies that you don't know something, I know something, and I'm going to teach you and make you better.
How can I help?
Yeah, it's the worst.
It's very hard. I hope to be able to facilitate just through conversation, shared experience, research, perspective shifts, that somebody who might see a situation really understanding it from another perspective. And I think just my kid being my kid, he could compete and be an amazing, pro, if he so chose to compete. And just seeing this kid who can do all these things, that's great. But just know he has the most sensitive neuroception. It impacts every single aspect of our lives and his their safety. And I think that just bringing that, again, I don't, no shame, no blame, but just recognizing we're in these systems of caste that really marginalize and continue to create unsafe environments for people with nervous system disabilities that throughout history, I believe, have been completely misunderstood and mistreated. So my goal is, I want to do this in education, not necessarily like community safety, law enforcement. And then right now I still want to do it in behavior analysis, but I don't know. I might just close that chapter altogether. I don't know. But I have there's this great group of people called the Critical Friends of ABA, and that they're just really exploratory, really ND affirming, and they've been very supportive of my journey too. But it's I think it's very hard for me to have these really conflicting. I know that you would come to my home and want to help my kid, but you're going to make these goals to decrease these behaviors, and you're going to use these behavior analytic strategies that would actually increase and cause more dysregulation. But how can I, that's been a very challenging thing for me. It was very good that it was very healing for me to let my BCBA, my certification lapse. And I don't know how far I'll go with that, but definitely the community safety and education.
We had a great talk with Julie Gordon. She created the Hope Source. It's in Indianapolis, and she said she could run from ABA and not do it, not be disassociated with it. This is another way we can do it that shows up with empathy, caring, understanding, and there is another path. And so instead of avoiding the conferences, which I've done, right? But we're gonna teach people and show people it's not old school. You don't always have to see somebody as a behavior, but as a person, and how can we do that? So
and you can include feelings and the nervous system and all of these things because they count.
And I think too, just coming from a place of radically like this child has these really, really hard behaviors that are impacting every aspect of their lives, but like I don't want to change those. I want to understand those behaviors and truly just create an environment where they feel safe enough to be able to get through a day, whatever it is. Like I just want, it's so, sometimes I feel very, what is this? You are crazy. What is this girl talking about? Like, why were you ever really a BCBA? Some of it seems so radical. Again, I'm not looking at it from behavioral. I'm looking at it from this only exclusively through a nervous system lens, because I can't go back to behaviorism at all. Even though I want to, sometimes and my kid is like, tracks data on me. He's actually pretty behavior analytic. I want to use behavior analytic terms to explain the way to look at it through a nervous system lens, but sometimes it's just so counterintuitive. It's hard. It definitely is hard. And I've just had, it's hard to go back to a place where you feel to choose to go back to that place and educate. It was very like draining to be at CalABA. I was able to meet with some critical friends of ABA and a great marriage and family therapist in LA named Jessica Richardson that works like pretty much exclusively with PDA families. So it's very attuned and in line. But any question I had, or if I brought up PDA during, it was the ACT talk, it was like an ACT workshop. It was I couldn't get through. Like it didn't register. Everything I was saying, it was probably not the time or place too, but there was no room for conversation there. And I think that will change and shift over time. But do I want to put my energy there or not? I don't know. I go back daily.
Yeah. And maybe it's not the time now, but I do think there is a way to weave it all together. And I feel a struggle or a tug and pull of like educating more or letting that be known more or just doing my own thing. And, I can understand after you going through kind of like trauma with your child and your experience and everything, it's hard to then put yourself back in there. But there are ways, and maybe this is a conversation for another time, but I see it connecting. I see it all valid and valuable and can go under this umbrella. Whether other people do or not, I don't know. But I think we can still look at those 4 functions and we could put the behavior under attention or communication, and then look at a deeper setting event or the deeper why is he trying to communicate in this way? Well, his nervous system is hijacked, and maybe that's the setting event. And we can't deny our nervous systems. It's not like something that's made up. This is science, and this is psychology, and this is our body and biology, and so to put that into the setting event, well, I don't know. I can see it all looping together. I don't know if
I
it's
hope
making
it can.
sense right
I
now.
mean, there's a whole aspect to PDA called equalizing. Equalizing is when a kid does not, or a human does not feel safe in their own nervous system. They will engage in behavior to, again, feel autonomous or to feel equal to, if not a little bit above, a status of someone else. That when that comes out with siblings, it looks like the sibling just built a block tower and with no setting, no trigger, the kid's just knocking it down. But that kid has so many other demands on them, right? It's not this ABC, right? There's intricacies with better like understanding equalizing, which is when a human's trying to get back into the safe zone of their nervous system. They may do things that they perceive to give them more autonomy or equality in a situation, such as knocking down their siblings' Legos or blocks. And it comes out of the blue, but it really isn't. But you have to really understand that this is truly a nervous system disability, and equalizing is a part of it. And it's hard to accept. It's very challenging to help get someone back into their thinking brain or to not feel that need to equalize. What does help is continuous one-on-one attention, support, nervous system co-regulation, but it's not always feasible. It's a really hard thing to wrap your brain around. But I do think what you're saying is right, Catherine. I'm sure there's a way to tie it all in.
What if it's access, if you're thinking about those 4 areas and you're thinking about access to like tangible or access to something, I think about access to safety in the nervous system. And I might be way off and we can cut this out if whatever, but I think about it that way. And then what do you do in response? Co-regulation. You do help their nervous system feel safe, but I think
But
it
then
can't be.
it looks like, oh my gosh, you're giving them praise and this or attention for their maladaptive behavior. But their maladaptive behavior is stemming from this need to get back into safety. So it's very hard for some people to understand. It's very hard. Like it took a while for especially, our parents to like really like understand that it's not always this very straightforward cause and effect. And these are the kids, like if people who have said ABA is abuse, like these are the families. We're the families saying that, because in a way, if you don't consider that, all these strategies, unless you're like a gem and are so good at imaginative play but really, I wrote a piece on natural environmental teaching. I was like, why can't I even teach my kid naturally? I'm not, because it came from me. It did not come from an original source. So I think that there's definitely ways. And I like to look at it like, if you look in like a crystal glass ball or a little marble, the view of what everything is, because it's convex, it's all upside down. Like taking that time to see, is there more to this? Or maybe what I think is maintaining the behavior is actually something more complex, or something. These kids are outliers. Like my daughter behavior, like typical parenting has been okay. She likes the low demand. We can't just do low demand with him. Like it's low demand across the board, and she appreciates that. But I think that, just realizing there is this reality where what you see is not necessarily caused by operant behavior or even learning histories. It's very interesting. So anyway, just another shift. And my hope is to facilitate more conversations like this and kind of tell anecdotes in our story. And everyone has stories of, when is the last time someone said something and that was the straw that broke the camel's back, and you exploded, but it was not really because of them. You can kind of think about those times. And that's starts that conversation of, this is what it's like waking up every day, with extremely sensitive neuroception.
Stephanie, thank you for being vulnerable and sharing your story.
Thank
your husband. Thank your husband for his service. And
thanks, Ryan.
Tell everybody where they can get more information, where they can find you. Yeah.
Okay.
Where can people find you?
Yeah, and right now I'm still working on my website and trying to have compassion for my capacity at this time.
That's a lot.
Yeah, the Rehumanization project on Instagram, and I'm right now just playing with the idea of cast based on this book by Isabella Wilkerson and how it all ties into a lot, and so it's not necessarily it definitely is advocacy, but kind of taking this shift. I'm not doing exactly what I was doing with the the revisionist exploration. But if you follow me there, that's great. And the website is in the works. And then I will, definitely just have some really amazing people to refer if you suspect your child has a PDA profile, or all these things, traditional parenting, or even if you had a BCBA, what they're telling is not working and your kid's becoming more activated. Honestly, it's these mothers of PDA kids that have saved us. They're the ones laying the path and really defying the systems and have normalized what our life is. And I would love for people to connect to them as well. It's really great to have community. And I have I even have a friend here where it's like, it's hard when as a parent, you can't explain it. Like it's so hard to actually get it. and have someone get it just like you and have been through the similar trauma and experiences you have. So those are great ways. They have, you know, online communities that connect parents. So that's been great too. And in the future, I told my daughter I was doing this, and she was like, "Oh, well, I want to talk about being a PDA sibling." So if you ever want a
Oh,
sibling,
Good one.
or
yes.
father, like a father's,
Yes.
because my husband's experience is very different. Yeah, he's not as
That'd be great.
technical in his understanding of it all, but he gets it, you know.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah, I'd love
He lives
to
it.
chat more. And I thank you
Yeah,
so much, guys. Else, let me know.
You,
great.
you nailed it,
Yes,
It
Stephanie.
was
You
thank
nailed
you
great
it.
to
so
connect with
much.
you guys, and I really thank you
Yes.
for your support and understanding, and that you're already doing this work. It makes me so
Mhm.
happy to know that, you know, people can be supported in the way that they need, and it's not all cookie cutter prescribed golden stand, you know, like that.
Yeah.
It just brings me so much joy. So I thank you
Oh,
guys so much
good.
for that.
Oh, good. Well, let's definitely stay connected,
For
and we
sure.
really appreciate you coming on, and we'll hopefully talk to you soon.
Yeah, thank you guys so
Okay.
much. You have a great
All
day.
right.
All right.
You
Thanks, Stephanie.
too. Bye.
Bye.